Hello, I'm Abu Laith. Thank you for joining us, fellow wanderers, for another episode of The Wandering Middle Eastern Teacher. So today we have another special guest. We are here with Dr. Brenda Brown. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, our pleasure. So first question, why did you get involved in education?
You know, this has been a desire since I was a child. I literally remember in my third grade classroom, sitting at my desk with my head on my desk while the teacher read out loud to us from a chapter book. And I just got lost in the stories that she would read. And I remember thinking then, I want to do that when I grow up. I want to be a teacher who reads to children, who makes them fall in love with stories and books. So it really became a desire since then. And when I got through with high school, I went straight into college and I went straight to the education department and said, I want to be an elementary school teacher. So that's how I got going.
Very nice. So, by the way, what is your favorite children's book?
Oh my goodness. One of my very favorites is The Velveteen Rabbit. Are you familiar with that book?
Yes, that's a good choice.
It's a great story about the preciousness of the gift of friendship. And I just love that book.
Yeah.
I do want to tell you something else. I went back when I was in college. I went back to my elementary school where I had moved when I was I was in sixth grade when we moved from there. But I went back to that elementary school and that third grade teacher was still there.
Oh.
And I went and found her. She looked exactly the same. She had these little glasses on and she looked like she hadn't changed a bit. But I wanted her to know what an impression she had made on me. And I wanted her to know that I was going into teaching and she was a big influence in that decision. So that meant a lot to her. So one thing I'd love to speak to your teachers about is if there is somebody in your life that has done that for you and been an impressive person that helped lead you into education, go back and tell them thank you because that meant a lot to her.
Oh, that's a really good thought. And yeah, encouragement, especially maybe that teacher's having a really rough day and like, okay, maybe I can keep doing this.
We all need that.
Yes. So in getting into more of your background, what have you taught? How long have you been teaching? And what's been your experience in the education world?
I was a classroom teacher. I taught kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and third grade for 27 years. Loved it. I loved being in the classroom with children. I loved seeing their faces light up when they learned something. I loved helping them fall in love with reading, which was the desire of my heart. And then I came out of the classroom and was an administrator in the elementary school where I taught for 3 years. Then I actually worked on my PhD in education through our university here in South Carolina. And I started working on the college level with helping to prepare teachers. And that's what I still help with, helping to prepare teachers for the teaching profession.
All right, so let's get into more of that unique perspective you bring from being on both sides, that you've spent time in the classroom, but also in administration and supervision of teachers. So what are some of the different skill sets it takes to be the administrator versus the classroom teacher? You know,
let me back up on that a little bit, because as I think about that, I think there's so many skill sets that are similar.
Yeah.
You need compassion in both roles. You need organization skills. You need excitement about learning. You need to be willing to work with students and teachers and families. You need to be willing to be part of a good team. You need to be caring. And as I think about that, it's in the classroom with the teacher, but it's also from an administrator perspective, because all of those qualities and traits need to be an administrator's tool bag too. They're just dealing with more with teachers and parents than the teachers are. They're dealing more with students and parents. Mm-hmm. But it's so much the same, but you have to be willing to really open your heart and do whatever you're led to do. Mm-hmm. The other thing I have always felt is administrators need to get back in the classroom, even if it's to teach one lesson or one day ever so often, because that was one thing when I came out of the classroom, I realized I need to go back in that classroom ever so often, because that's where the work is done. Mm-hmm. And administrators need not to forget what it feels like to be in that classroom with kids.
Right. Yeah. I remember in a lot of my teacher education classes, they would talk about how students have attention spans of like 90 seconds, and then they would lecture us from PowerPoints for the entire class.
Yes.
We had forgotten a little bit what it was like to be in front of those kids with a 90-second.
That is so true. That is so true.
Yeah. So another question, what would you say? So you mentioned compassion. Are there any other skills or qualities that you found really important to being in leadership, in supervising and in administration?
Being a multitasker. Of course, that's true in the classroom too, but especially for administrators. Being able to see with the eyes of a teacher as well as the eyes of an administrator, because when you go in that classroom to observe or to try to help direct what's going on in the classroom, once again, you've got to remember what it's like to be in the classroom all day long with the children. But then you've also got to have the skill set to be able to sit down with that teacher later in the day and compliment. You should always start off with something that teacher's doing right. Always start off with that. And find those things. Every teacher has things they're doing right. Even if you're frustrated with the teacher about something, you can find something that teacher's doing right. So if you start off with that compliment and then say, here is something though I'd love to help you with. I'd love to work with you on this. Here in America, we have this thing that we used to call 3 pluses and a wish. And I would use it in the classroom with my kids when they would do a project. And after their project was finished and I was sitting down to talk with them about their work, I would say, I've got 3 pluses and a wish for you. And I would give them 3 compliments of something that they did well on their project. And then I would say, and I would wish for you to correct your spelling more, or I'd wish for you to start off this paper with a better introduction about what it's about, something like that. And I use that technique also now as an administrator, or I did as an administrator, and now even as a teacher of teachers who are trying to become, students who are trying to become teachers. But 3 pluses and a wish is a great way to sit down when you're an administrator with your teachers. Give them 3 things that you notice that they did well, and then something you'd like for them to work on. And sometimes you might have 2 wishes or 3 wishes, but always start off with what they're doing well.
Wow, I really like that idea. I've never heard it phrased like that, but that's genius. And that it works with little kids, with PhD students.
That's right.
It reminds me of one experience I had with administrator. She had just done a teacher observation for a classroom that was a handful. And so when we went back into her office to discuss, the first words out of her mouth was, "You are the worst teacher in the school at behavior management, and I have no idea how to help you." So from that point on, my soul was crushed, and it didn't really matter anything else she said. I was just kind of done. Absolutely.
She lost you. She lost you right then. There was no going back from that. See, and that is an example of how not to do a teacher conference.
Yeah, we learned a lot from the negative examples.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit from there. So one of the things, kind of a new thing that you've been doing is you've been doing some training internationally of teachers.
Yes.
What has that been like? What have you learned from that process? How are teachers overseas different or the same from teachers in America?
You know, doing this, I've been doing some international travel to work with teachers for about the past 8 years. And it has been one of the biggest blessings of my life. Honestly, honestly, I love meeting teachers in other countries. One of the things that I tell them in every country I go to is, you are just like me. You are just like me. You are in this profession because you want to make a difference in children and students' lives. And you love them. You're trying your best to help them to grow, not just academically, but as a person. And you don't get paid enough.
I like that.
All over the world, all over the world. But I have been blessed to travel to probably 10 countries, and 4 of those have been in the Middle East, to work with teachers at teacher conferences to try to help them become better teachers. And it has really been a big joy for me to do that.
Have you found like a consistent area that teachers overseas, and maybe especially in the Middle East, kind of need some extra help in?
I actually have, and I share that openly with them. I really try to encourage them to include more active learning in their lesson plans, because understandably, because they have such large classes, usually in the Middle East and in a lot of countries, it's a lot of teacher directed learning and a lot of memorization. But research has shown us over and over again that the more active learning that children and teenagers participate in, the more they retain the learning. I have another little thing that I use and teach when I share with teachers overseas. It's called the 5 steps of active learning. The first one is readiness, and it's just the idea of beginning your lesson with a hook, something that gets the student ready to learn what your focus is. What are you getting ready to teach? It might be a joke. It might be a short story. It might be a song. It might be a picture, but something that kind of pulls them in. You know, you just want to hook them and pull them in to where they go, wonder what this is going to be about, what this lesson is going to be about. So that's step 1, is readiness. And then step 2 is explore. And that's where you're giving them some initial information about the topic or the subject that you're getting ready to teach. And you might even guide them to explore it in some way, whether it's through a book or whether it's through something they look on the internet about. But you're kind of, once again, you're going a little bit deeper into the subject and capturing their attention. And then the next one, so you've got readiness, you've got explore. The third one is discover. And that's where they're learning the material. So what does that look like? Is it an experiment that they can do? Is it a small group activity they can do where they're coming up with an advertisement about something and they have to learn about it before they can write up the advertisement? Is it they're writing a play about something that they're learning about? But you're trying to get them to get into the material and discover more about it themselves. And a lot of times that's in a small group. Even if you have a large class, you can often pull 4 tables together or 4 chairs together and give them an assignment to do in all those small groups that they then share later. So you've got readiness, you've got explore, you've got discover, and then you've got apply. So in apply, I try to help teachers think about how to help their students apply what they're learning to the real world they live in. So if they've discovered something about this topic and material and learned something, how are they now going to apply what they've learned to their real world? And then the last one is share. Because if students learn what you want them to learn, they've learned the material, they ought to be able to teach it to somebody else. So if they can share it, then that means they've learned it. So I call it 5 steps of active learning: readiness, explore, discover, apply, and share. And that's one of my favorite things to teach teachers when I go to these conferences, is just to try to think outside the box a little bit, and not just do the same old every day, and not just stand in front of the class and repeat and have them memorize. So that's the biggest thing I try to encourage them in doing, no matter what country I'm in, here in America too.
Yeah, I like those last 2 steps as well, the apply and the share, because that's where students are not just kind of mindlessly receiving facts, but they have to use it and to see like this does matter to the real world. And I mean, it's so true. You don't really know something unless you can teach it to somebody else. That really helps. Yeah. There are a couple ideas, and you probably have lots more. Some things I would do in class would be like exit slips. They have a question they have to answer at the end of class. They just write an answer, show the teacher, and that's their permission to leave the class. Or like 1 minute, you teach your neighbor, answer the question, and then they teach you back, something like that. What other ideas have you seen for people to do, especially that share part?
Yes, one of the things I often use in my classroom is called think, pair, share. And I get them to turn to their neighbor. I throw a question out or an assignment out or something, and I ask them to think, pair, share with their neighbor. So they have to think about the answer, think about what the question was, then pair up with somebody and share with each other. Both of them have to share their thoughts about that question. And that can be a quick thing, or that can be a longer thing, because that could lead to discover and apply and share, you know, but that's a good quick way to just do a making them participate idea.
Yeah, lots of good ideas. Hopefully that helps you out there, teachers getting started, or even if you've been teaching for a while. You can always learn new things, always improve as a teacher. Thank you so much, Dr. Brenda Brown, for being part of our interview today.
You're welcome. I'm so glad you invited me. And all you teachers, I'll be thinking about you, because you're doing a wonderful job. You are a blessing. No matter what country you're in, no matter what age students you're teaching, you are a blessing. So thank you for being a teacher.
All right, thank you. And fellow travelers, wanderers, join us next time for more travel guides, more teacher reviews to help you in your journey, wherever it may take you. Bye, my friend.
Bye.